So I'm Alison Hall. I'm the Associate Dean for Research Workforce Development. We're running again this session on writing an NIH F31 fellowship. I think we'll probably run it every year. But this year we have some special highlights because we have 2 students who received an F31 who will bring reality into this story. So I've only been at GW for just over 2 years. I actually sat on and chaired an F31 study section in sciences. So I've seen a lot of F31s. The Institute has its own way of looking at things, and obviously things change over time. But I think that we should have an F31 at every time. We're going to talk today about the F31 as if it's the only thing going on. But for those of you who are postdocs, the F31 is remarkably similar to F30. So don't worry about that, and almost everything that's said is about the same. And for those of you who are non-US citizens or permanent residents, or who want to apply for an American Heart Fellowship or something like that, many of the things that we'll talk about today will be similar across different kinds of fellowships. We're going to have need to sort of give some structure to this, but I'm going to bounce back to our collaborators, Indra Sarabia and Jiaqi, both of whom have won F31s. And I put their F31s up here because those of you who think about the NIH will know this is from allergy and infectious disease. This is from child health and human health. So the F31 is available from, I believe, all of the granting NIH ICs, or 20. And there are different kinds of them. We will touch on those in just a minute. But think about where your F31 might fit. Now, some of you I know have just turned in an F31. Are any of you thinking of, some of you are first-year students, so it's a little too early to write your F31. Are any of you thinking of writing for the December 8th deadline? So I know 3 people who have sent me their fellowship applications who are applying. And I just want to make sure that if we have really short-term needs. So the F31 application is set out by the NIH, really long, and contains a whole lot of what seems like extraneous material. It's not extraneous to the NIH, and the reviewers are going to see it all, so we need to pay some attention. This is a slide just to show you, for those of you who are just coming out of your candidacy exam, and you've prepared your page of specific aims, and you've prepared your 6 pages of research approach, think, well, I'm done, I'm ready to go apply for this fellowship. Hooray, I just have to put my name on the front page. Are all these other pages of stuff in the application? One becomes its own application. One the reviewers are going to see. So the specific aims page and the 6 pages of research strategy are part of your application. They are not the only reason that you will get granted the fellowship. The most important set of things is the applicant goals and the sponsor statements. How longer did these take you than the research strategy? Okay.
I wrote it after my Alzheimer's, full time Alzheimer's.
As you press the pedal down. And how long did it take you?
Yeah, I took it about I say that I have to do all of these other things. There's other things like that you have to think about writing a budget for it. How to do that, writing annual justification, all of these other things.
Okay, so we're trying to make it easier. I'll show you that we revamped the website on SMHS Research Doctoral Fellowship. It now has lots of materials for you and some templates to use, but you still have to do. Okay, so we'll show you about where some of those changes are. In general, there are 2 F31s. So the F30 is for MD PhD students. The F31 is for predoctoral fellowships, which is what I think we're going to be talking about today. And the F32 is for postdoctoral fellowships. All right. So there are 2 flavors of F31, what they call the parent F31, individual predoctoral fellowship with PhD National Research Service Award, yada yada. And a second F31 F-31, we colloquially have called the F-31 diversity. So it's to enhance diversity. Exactly the same in all ways, except that you must belong to an underrepresented in biomedical science to apply for this one. And it requires an eligibility that I write. So if you're thinking about applying to a fellowship, you need to go to the NIH instructions, and those are always what they call program announcements. These happen to be the 2 program announcements now. And how long is a funding opportunity announcement? Pages and pages
Yeah.
of the announcement. There are about 134 pages of instructions from the NIH about how to do that thing. There's a lot of administrative ease in there. Some of it is relevant to what you're doing and some of it is less so. But this is really, make a copy of this and you should make sure you do all the stuff they say. Your application for a little while, like next year, just check to see which program announcements still in effect. Keep it updated. Usually they're around for 3 years, but sometimes the NIH has some. From the NIH are for U.S. citizens and permanent residents. We have a list of foundation fellowships that are available on our website. Those generally don't have citizens. So I put a slide in to say start early and plan ahead, which neither of these 2 did. So they're going to tell you you can do it lickety split, but it was probably maybe not the easiest experience. So the 2 of you took a little bit longer to put it in. How long would you say it took you from when you thought you were going to do it to put it in? Months. Okay, so 2 to 3 months or 5 months or about 6 weeks. So starting ahead actually makes it a lot easier and a lot less stressful. And one of the things to remember is you can't stop going to the lab and saying, I'm going to go write my fellowship now, see you in a month. Doing it around all this stuff. And that's a good thing, but it also requires a real time to focus. You need to think about whether you have pilot data or the application needs pilot data. And you need to develop these goals and your at GW and at Children's, we have grants administrators who actually do the submitting of the NIH. NIH award will be given to GW or to Children's to pay for it. It's flowing through the budgetary system, the business officials of each of our institutions. So at GW, you would likely talk to your department administrator, who will ultimately submit this through our system, which is called Children's, you're going to go through one of the division administrators related to your division, and they will submit it from Children's.
Your PI will know who contacted the office at Children's.
So one of the things you need to do in advance is to get an ERA comment. It sounds really boring, but it's essential, and that's the way the NIH with you, and that same administrator can make that happen. You need to make sure that your research advisor and your committee and your recommenders are all in line with this goal. If you say, I'm going to write this fellowship, and they're like, you're not ready, or I'm out of town for 6 months, that's going to be a much more challenge. Did you talk about it with your committees before you wrote it?
I did.
Suggested.
Recommendations that my specific aim in my thesis were not necessarily the ones for my F-31. And so, you guys have aims for your, not all of those aims.
So, since probably you went through, but GW's changed the way you go through the qualifier exam so that you are in a much better state to be competing for a fellowship once you've passed your. So instead of a comprehensive exam, you actually write a specific aims page and develop a research approach. Aims may or may not be the aims. And those aims may or may not be the thesis. They're going to be highly related to working in Magnolia, but they are really good places to start. You may develop them a little bit more. You may go through your qualifier and realize I have a hole here, or there's an area I'd like to pursue. That's all totally fine. You're not bound to them in some way. So once you've communicated that, oh, I'm going to go for a fellowship, and begun to talk to the administrator who wants to know it's coming. Don't surprise your administrator a week before. They would like to help you more than that. And they will also get upset. Respect their time as well, because it does take. I wanted to point out that University of Alabama Birmingham has posted a bunch of their successful applications. While they're not exactly where you want to be, and sometimes the program announcements change a little bit, they're a really nice set of sample applications. About like one section, how do I talk about it? That's actually pretty nice. Be able to see a couple of comments.
I just want to note your pilot data doesn't have to be your personal pilot data. It can be pilot data from your lab. So, you know, if you're early on in it, you'll rest out that you also have to collect all of this data before you write it. And then the other thing is that you are going to need letters, not only from your research advisor and your collaborators, but in my case at Children, it's also a really good idea to have a letter from your departmental head. So for my case, it was the director for the Center of Neuroscience Research, who wasn't my direct advisor. And then if you guys want my F31 to look at, feel free to write me and I'll send it along.
Good advice. Okay, so the NIH, being a government organization, has 3 standard due dates for fellowships. They're expecting them 3 times a year. The next deadline is December the 8th. But you could be sending them on any of these dates. In general, the applications will take about 4 or 5 months to get reviewed once you've submitted them. And it's often really difficult to get a grant in August 8th and know anything about it to apply for December 8th. So that's, you can't really make that deadline to revise and resubmit. You'd likely have to wait until April 8th for a resubmission. Okay? So it just takes a lot longer than you think. And then all of this is posted online. In general, you're going to send your application in, let's say, for December the 8th, this 3rd cycle. What they call a scientific merit review is your study section, and that's going to occur several months later, maybe like 2 or 3 months later. That will be posted on your ERA Commons site. In fact, to everyone's annoyance, you generally know the day and time your grant's going to be ready. They go play pool or something. After they meet, you will eventually get a score and a summary statement with narrative comments about your application. Score usually appears within 2 weeks. The narrative might take a month for you to get. Stuck in this place called I have a number and don't have comments for a while, and then you get your comments. After the study section meets, because the study section is just scientists around the country who are trained to review these, the internal NIH Advisory Council meets to decide, let's say they have 100 fellowships, and there's some great scores down to about 24, and then the scores get lower and lower and lower and lower. The Advisory Council will approve how many of those to fund after recommendation to the IC. So no money leaves town until they have met. And that can get annoying too. From this submission, the earliest possible start date. Sometimes things happen there. There's a long time of hurry up, get dressed, turn the thing in, wait a really long time. It's happening in the lab, right? You may be learning that the aim was terrific or that it wasn't terrific. I continue to suggest that you talk to your program officer. Did you talk to your program officer?
Not
Part of it. Did you talk to your program officer? Okay. The program officer is at each institute who's in charge of, in this case, the F3. employs a lot of program officers. They're usually given a portfolio of grants, and they are there to help you be successful. Nothing to do with anything you want. And I suggest that you do ask them. I suggest that you say, hi, I'm going to submit an F31. Here is my specific aims, and here is my biosketch, or something like that, so they have a clue what you're talking about. Do you mind if we talk next Tuesday at 1 o'clock? The second thing about NIH staff is it's much better to talk to them on the telephone, particularly if you have anything that you're sensitive about on the telephone. They will feel much freer to speak with you on the telephone. So here are some things you might talk to that program officer about. This is before you turn in your application. Okay? Is this fellowship right for me? Do I fit this fellowship objectives? Are my research aims a good fit for your institute? So your research area might appeal to. If you want to, you can get your application sent to a couple of institutes in order. You need to decide whether you want to do that. What you really want to figure out is, do I have a reasonable chance of getting this thing funded? So you can say, how many F31s did you fund last year? Okay. The data annually is posted online, but you might want to ask what's been happening. Because they change from the How much preliminary data is important for this application? About what you have, you can talk about other things from the lab, you can talk about other pieces of that. How many applications do you review? This is super important. Do you know how yours was reviewed? Did it go to NST1? Yours was reviewed? Do you know where it was? Bethesda, Rockville generally, sometimes it's in San Francisco. But the applications might be reviewed, for example, by NST1 or NST2. These are two chartered study sections at Neurological Institute, Neurological Disease and Stroke. And that means that there are reviewers who do that all the time, and that's what their group does. And you can look up the roster online, who's sitting on that. Other institutes prefer to review their fellowships, what they call in-house. And they'll call up a bunch of scientists from around the country to sit on a group. They might meet in person, they could meet on the phone, but you want them to meet in person. But that group would be constituted or unconstituted as they felt like it. So it's sort of people that they know who are good reviewers for fellowships, and they bring them together. It's a little less standard, and that reviewer might only do one session as opposed to 3 sessions. So you can ask them about that. You can also ask them, how can I make my fellowship better? Right? Did you ever do that? Well, there isn't a magic.
There isn't.
If there was one, we put it right here.
Exactly. Like they can answer all those questions, but it's not. I knew that my PO was the same PO as my PI's PO, and so we had a word with the people, but I said my name very early.
So, Indra, you remarked that you talked to your program officer after you submitted it. And what kind of conversation is that?
It's a nicer conversation, have a nice score. So they publish the P lines, the score that they say this is the cutoff, anything above that we won't fund. So then we talk to them, ask them how likely is it to be funded, if it's close, we can see what they're feeling like. Sometimes they have end of year funds. After you get your score, it's not like there are weaknesses like, oh, your publication record. Actually, update them on your progress. I'm working on a manuscript, or we submitted, we're waiting to get comments, to update them, to send them. don't recommend emailing your PO right as you get your score. You should definitely wait until you get your comments back first, because they will just tell you, wait until you get your comments.
Yes, it is. Okay, so your program officer is your friend, or should be. Since I've been at GW, I have learned about a couple of program officers who don't answer the phone and don't respond to me. So that also happens, and that is a wrong thing. And discuss particular approaches to take. But they are really supposed to respond.
So mine got, I have a FO1A study section, and the section officer is the program officer. Should I befriend the program officer or the section?
So you should only befriend the program officer for them. You should not at any time approach the people involved.
Right,
That
okay,
could violate the review.
Yeah.
Okay, so the only person that you really want to talk to is the program officer. That program officer is listed on the parent announcement or on these IC specific things. And occasionally you might need to talk to another different management. And that's okay to talk to them. That's once the money is actually happening. Do not approach anybody. Never ever approach anybody sitting on a study section. But do not approach the NIH staff involved. Live in a little bright line away from them.
If you have a comment or use application, it'll also give you the
So I know that this is really tiny, but we can give you the PowerPoint for this, but this is just to show you that we've totally revised the online resources for you writing a fellowship here at SNHS Research. Completely revised. So it includes a lot of useful information. These are all drop-down menus about applications, registrations for ORCID and ID, blah, blah, blah. An example of a timeline. What I think will be most useful to you while you're writing is what we call checklists and resources. And for each of the multiple pages of that fellowship, we give you the instructions and several different documents that will, they're sort of templates for explaining. So you could sit in a cave and write your whole F31 following these instructions. I suggest you do that, but there are lots of resources. Your application will be much, much better. Share drafts of it with your colleagues, me or somebody else who sits on study sections. It will be better if somebody else looks at it and just gives you some feedback. There are some information about the diversity fellowships. There are sample applications. At the bottom, there are non-NIH predoctoral and postdoctoral funding. So we'll link to a lot of different others. This is to help you make sure that you're successful. This reminds me of a couple of other things you may want to do. Starting in January, you absolutely must have an ORCID. ORCID is a way to take every Jane Smith and provide a specific number so we can find that Jane Smith's publications for all time, as opposed to the other Jane Smith. It's free, it's easy, you just get a numerical identifier. It's a very wise idea to have done an individual development plan. You're starting this out so that you can identify what you put out and maybe the things you'd like to work on in the next year or in the next 2 years. And this leads you to a lot of, I think, reasonable resources. Comments we already talked about. INCBI is where you will link all of your publications for your whole. In just a minute, you will be providing an NIH biosketch, and that allows you a certain number of publications for your scientific conclusions. But you may have what they call research products that are not a publication. You could have made a video. You could have made a database. You could have made a website. You could have made a lot of non-standard research products. You can't put those on your biosketch. You have to have things on the biosketch that are indexed by the government and put them in your MyNCBI and thus lead somebody to it. So one reason to have a MyNCBI is you can put non-standard work products in. You can also link every paper you've ever published in my NCEI, even if you can't listen on your biosketch. So these are things you could do right now as you're thinking about writing a fellowship. And they will as you start to apply. Okay. But it's a good idea to go and set them up right now. I wanted to ask everybody who has written an F-31 what your strategy was for your F-31. I'm pleased to cover a little bit about your research background, when in your graduate career you wrote the application, three things that surprised you, and any tips or advice you have. Look at it.
Okay, so I'm in the MIT department. I was wrote the application. I defended my exam on Halloween last year, and then right after that, I worked on it till like mid-December. The deadlines are sooner than listed. So those are NIH deadlines. That does not mean that your department head will submit IUs on the 7th. It means they need it like 2 or 3 weeks before. Because they need to do a lot of administrative things to it before they can actually submit. So deadlines are much sooner. That is something that you will know if you talk to them as you're preparing. Not all the comments that you get will be relevant for your application. Really time consuming. Unless you're gonna dedicate the whole however much time you're gonna spend on it, it's very wise to start earlier rather than later. It wasn't very fun and it was very, very hard. So if I could, I would have done it. And my 3 tips to read through your application, really, really helpful people in your lab or other colleagues that you I mean, that's it. Looking at successful applications, not just looking at their qualifications. On Alex, but that one, she's a MD, PhD, and she's amazing, and she's gonna cure cancer, and it's like a very very accomplished. Yeah, I was thinking like, well, I don't have any of this. How am I going to get it? I haven't done anything. That's what I'm saying. Which of the application is really important. The way that they kind of know I'm highly qualified because of this. That's the language of the application. It's not what that is. We're done it a lot. So I'm Jiaqi O'Reilly. I started my application very, very late, and I don't recommend you doing that. I think I would go for the end of my 3rd year. It's not recommended to do it that late. Definitely try to get it in, at the end of your semester. At the beginning of your year, the earlier you get it in, better. And I submitted my application to NIC. The things that surprised me most were the training goals. So I personally want to get out of academic research eventually, but that's not what you should write in your training goals at all. They're not really interested in your true lifetime training goals. They're more interested, that you want to become a strong researcher. So even though I don't want to stay in academia, it still is one of my training goals to become a really strong researcher. So definitely try to phrase it in that way. The other thing I was surprised about was that in my feedback, I was told that I was overcommitted. So, it's good to have volunteer experience. It's good to want to explore these other career options, but for this, it really should be about research. And people are told that they're overcommitted in regards to the depth of their aims. So they want to get too many things done in the period of the F-31, they're over optimistic about that, so you're committing to work with sure that you have really concrete aims that are doable in your time frame. And then to not emphasize too much outside development for that type of thing.
Outside
outside of research. So I wrote that I wanted to start a policy group at Children's, which I've somewhat done, but they told me it was too much. And I was also the coordinator of training development at Children's, and so they were very concerned that I'd be able to get my F31 aims done and do all of these other extra. Definitely still do them, just hesitant your time commitment. The thing that surprised me was the other things that you had to do. As I mentioned earlier, I had never written a budget before, and that was really challenging to me. Something that you probably have never ever done before. I'd never had to write animal justification parts before, so that was a real. Three tips are one, obviously, to start early. I think that it's a really good idea to consider who's going to be on your SRO committee. Usually those are posted from years prior, and you can see that the same people tend to be on the reviewing committees. So if you can cite those people, it's a great idea to do that. And it's also important to understand who the board is, because it can really help you figure out what gaps in your knowledge they're going to pick out, right? If you're in a neuroscience field and someone's an expert electrophysiologist, you want to make sure that if you're including electrophysiology, that part is perfectly written, your science is really. The thing that I would recommend is that you want to look at the different agencies you can submit your F31 to. I'm in neuroscience, and so I just assumed I would submit it to NINDS because that's the major neuroscience one. But my grant definitely did better to get NICHD. And then the final thing is, if you can possibly submit it in the April deadline, I think that's a really great idea because it'll still give you enough time to submit it again in the December deadline. I submitted it in the August deadline, and because I was late in my career, it meant that if I didn't get my funding, I would never have.
If you're doing HIV research, there's only really one place you can send it to. There's that.
So, there's a couple of things that I think are super important. The first one is, when you're gonna write the fellowship. So the fellowship will not be awarded until you are in dissertation. That means you've passed candidacy. You should put your candidacy pass date in your application. It's actually required in one of the statements. So you can't get it until you have passed your candidacy, which for us is usually in the end of the second year. Although you can go up for candidacy early. So it's likely that you're gonna go in sometime after the summer of the second year. You will have had a mentor, presumably, for a year on that. You're developing components of your fellowship once actually coming. Give yourself some time. The thing is this choice of institute issue. So I was just speaking to somebody who said, oh, my grant could go into NINDS or it could go into the I Institute. One of them has a lot more money than the other one. And when she approached the program officer, they actually made that decision. She talked to each of the program officers and made a decision about where to submit. They're getting kind of complex as sort of answers, but there's something to think about when you start going at it. And your advisor, others will help you make decisions because it sounds a little bit like me. One of the things you're going to need to write is your NIH biosketch. It is the fellowship style biosketch, and it's available online, and you need to write it, and you'll be components of it. First thing, it's there to capture your educational history. You have a personal statement. Later on in the biosketch, you have positions and honors, and then you have this confusing thing called contribution to science. And for a fellowship, you need to list all of your funding. For a graduate fellowship, you have to list your undergraduate course names and grades by timing, by year, and your graduate grades and course titles. That really feels a little hokey, but that's the truth of it. If your grades are not perfect, don't let that stop you. If there's something unusual happen, here's a place to talk about it. So the personal statement is a personal statement designed for a specific applicant. In general, you're going to say, my long-term research interests are focused on something or other, and I am well qualified to lead this F-31 effort. You should mention the program that you're applying for in your personal statement. Later on, when you're writing an R1, you'll have a different personal statement. This is how ready you're. This is very specialized for the application. Place if you had to withdraw from school for a semester, if you had bad grades, if you worked for a couple of years, if you had military history, this is where you put it. So this is a place where you explain any gaps or changes, and it's also a place where you tell the reviewer a story about your interest in research. How did you get to where you are right now? I started in biochemistry and then became a neuroscientist. You might have studied at their IRTA program. You've done something that's unique. Shape your view about what you're going to propose. This is a place to talk about it, and you use I. I did this, I did that. The personal statement is a piece of this, and you can list some recent papers here if you have some. I'm not showing you the rest of the bio sketch, but you come to this contribution to science. So usually your contributions to science can be associated with phases or labs that you were in. For example, you were an undergraduate and you did an honors thesis on frog vision. Well, so you'd write, one of your contributions would be, NMDA function in brain visual processing. I'm making that up. And then you would say, when I was an undergraduate, I worked with Dr. Smith and I learned how to do physiology and things, and I presented that at the local science fair. And so you have up to contributions to science, and you can list papers or presentations for each of them. Or remember, you've got that MyNCBI thing. Could be you created a database. You can cite that here. How did you feel about the contributions to science?
I didn't have very many, so I didn't have very good feelings about it. So I didn't have a publication yet. I had only had experience.
Writing a contribution to science part was the easiest part of this. You should know what your contributions to science are. And those contributions don't necessarily have to only also be, I train so many people at this stage. And also be, this is a place where you could add volunteer work. In addition to training people, you volunteer with children. Doesn't necessarily.
Is the section that I think is the hardest for everyone. So you have your specific aims, that's science. They resemble the aims that you have. You have your research approach, is how you're going to test that hypothesis, what methodology you're going to use, and so forth. A bunch of people come and ask you for 6 pages about your background and goals and the activities in this. This is often very challenging for candidates. 6 pages that describe your doctoral dissertation and your research experience. So when I was in college with the fish eyes, and now I'm a doctoral student so-and-so, that's sort of okay. It feels like you're repeating your bio sketch a little bit, and it is a little bit. Your training goals and objectives. And then your activities planned under this award. So this section is again individualized for you. This award assists you in your research and career goals. What are your research and career goals? So this is a section where you say, well, why do I need this fellowship? I need this fellowship because I want to be a great researcher. I might have a long-term goal to work in academia or in biotechnology. And so you might say that. You might approach this in a variety of ways. So generally, for training goals and objectives, you have a long-term research goal in mind, whatever that is. You may not have decided what it is. You could say it's this or that. Fine. All the things you do in the proposal should help you decide if it's this or that. So you might have, as one of your activities, to do an externship at, a biotech company, or to take some courses in regulatory affairs, or to do something that's helping you decide how to spend your research. Under this award require a timeline of activities, and they are partly research and partly development. present this work at Society for Neuroscience. I'm gonna write this up as a paper. I'm going to attend that Gordon conference. And the whole time I'm taking seminars, and over here I'm gonna do my RNA-seq. So it's basically everything we're going to do. Research and professional development. Okay.
It's not my favorite part of writing this. As I said earlier, the training goal should definitely be research focused. So my goals were to, learn how to rigorously test hypotheses, learn how to become a better analyzer of data. It was very much about, about research. I think that the training goals and activities planned under this award, very much what Dr. Hall said, it's about planning to do so many posters. It's about also, I think, deciding to meet with your mentor so many times over the course of a year. I feel like there's these things that we assume are just natural parts of your PhD, but now actually just have to.
This part was not bad. I had filled out my ID, so I had a general idea of what's lacking. When you do that evaluation, you have clear in mind, like let's say, or biotech. They give you these categories of communication skills, leadership skills. They're broad categories, and what scores people who have those careers, what they have. So if they usually have a 4 in leadership and you have a 1, then it's like work on leadership. Or and you get to develop technical skills, expertise, literature, all that stuff. So I had that in the background. When I was writing this, I wrote it very much to enhance my communication skills. I will writing all these other things. So that helped a lot if you
With a training cabinet, I think a great way to do it is to do it by a grid style, where you'll say like year 1 I'll do X, Y, and Z. Year 2 I'll continue doing whatever. And then I also recommend that you extend your training time to the maximum amount of years. So always say that things are going to take 3 years, not each part, but that your F31 should last 3 years. Better to ask for more funding and then maturity rather than not ask for enough.
One other point I wanted to make is these NRSA awards are not designed to make you a better teacher. Do not propose that you are planning to TA. Propose that.
back to where I was saying that the comments are not always relevant. So one of the major criticisms I wasn't spending teaching, and that I should really think about teaching in the latter half of the fellowship. So again, it's hilarious because I explicitly said I want to or whatever, and I explained like I do not want to be a teacher. So that's
We have a template budget online on the SMHS research site. The NRSA will pay $24,816 for your fellowship stipend. It will pay 60% of the tuition that you ask for. You shouldn't put any student fees in there. And you have an additional institutional allowance of $4,200, which generally is used first for healthcare and then for travel to meetings, sometimes with restrictions, or you could go to Cold Spring Harbor and take a workshop. So as you write your budget, part of it is written for you. Everybody knows this is not your stipend. So the goal is that at the moment, the Dean for Research pays the difference between those. At some point, you're going to have too many fellowships here. About that. But at the moment, we make up the fellowships of the GW. It used to be the PI would make up the fellowship. But at the moment, that's the deal. The tuition and fees, you kind of have a lot of tuition left, but you should cite every single cent of it, okay? And then we'll try to get that and your student fees. and your health insurance will remain this low amount. So we've written a budget for it that will help your administrative assistant, but the fact is that you need to run this through your administrator. They will know how the institution. Jiaqi said, you aren't even talking about specific names. Why don't you talk about specific names? So I'm talking about specific names.
That's to me like one of the most important things.
But if you have perfect specific names and the training goals,
But if you have horrible,
all true. So, one of the reasons I didn't put it in the original presentation is that we have a course that talks about writing these. And it is absolutely a part of your proposal to write effective specific names. This is kind of a cheat sheet about specific names. It's not like you could just do this and get it all right. But there is a sort of a general idea that you'll have 2 and at most 3 names for a fellowship. The most common reason that people don't get their fellowship is they propose too much work. 10 years of work. More is not better. Okay? So if we see 10 years of work, it says that you are not speaking to the mentor and nobody is talking to you about how to do it. Not a good thing. You do need to define the question you want to answer. It is still true that having a hypothesis that's logical, testable, focused, simple is a good idea. Hypothesis on that page, that's a good idea. My hypothesis is, and that's a statement. Sheet structure for specific aims. In the first paragraph, you have to capture the attention what the gap is you're going to address. This is not a place to be the Wikipedia of all things. This is a place to incisively say, we know a lot about this, but we don't know this important thing. Right? Immediately the reviewer knows what you're doing. Second paragraph, in general, you're going to introduce how you're going to address that problem. This is a problem, or knows there's a problem. I'm going to use this wicked clever approach to address that problem. Generally have sections for specific aim 1, that, specific aim 2, and that, specific aim 3, and that. And then you'll have a summary paragraph about how things will be different once you get it. It's critical to advance this forward or in therapy. A lot about it in the grant writing course, but I strongly suggest if a model or a chart or a working diagram that visually portrays to the reviewer what you're doing. Don't necessarily know the specific names.
this is a really good place to use bold text, underlines, italics. Really want to highlight what you want to highlight and make it as clear as possible. This is also a place where you can put bullet points, and I think that's a good idea. Because it'll easily separate your
Generally, you're going to work on your specific aims probably until the day you turn it. So you'll come up with a draft page of specific aims, the approach to address those specific aims. In doing that, you'll modify a specific aim to rewrite that specific aims page. Kind of goes back and forth in a slightly iterative process as you develop the method. This is a page that is really important. When you go to study section, your grant is assigned to 2 or 3 reviewers amongst, say, 25 or 30. And those 2 or 3 reviewers read the whole grant. It is possible that the other 25 people in the room never read your grant. Many of them may never read your specific aims page. But if they review anything, they're going to see your specific comes up for a review, Indra's first reviewer, and she'll say, you know, this candidate is this, and this research is that, and this is all really wonderful. Jiaqi will say, well, I beg to differ on that point. I believe this is what's important, blah, blah, blah. The rest of you are just listening to these two discuss this. And maybe you're going to pull it up on your computer, see the specific names. It's really important to get your specific names.
So a good place to hit home the health consequences of your research. Don't forget that you can read a lot about that.
My other 3 pages about hypotheses, just in virtue of time. So you're going to develop a strong research framework. Please recall that having a really strong specific aims research approach by itself will not be. So it's really important that the training component come through. I generally suggest, if you have the time, that after you've written your training goals and objectives, remember that page where you said, well, I'm gonna learn this and I'm gonna try that? Come back and you drop a few of those activities back into your research program. Studies, I will interact with the core facility in genomics and learn how to do RNA sequence on the homophobe. That you put in your training objectives in the research. And then it actually looks like one person is doing this in a cohesive training. You can't do that if you don't have time. Your training plan, those goals and objectives, should match what your mentor says. And I know that sounds really obvious, but it sometimes comes through that the mentor and the trainee are in different counties when they wrote these proposals. It is wise to do a couple of things to address this. You can talk with your mentor about what the training goals and objectives are. Right. You could write your section first and give it to your mentor. You could write your mentor's section as a draft and discuss that. There are lots of ways to have this match what you're trying to do. We used to say we would like to see a brand new method, new to the lab method, would be achieved by a trainee. We'd like to see a new collaborator, new to the lab with the trainee. You are moving that lab in a very precise way, but you need to describe what you're getting from your mentor, because he or she's an expert in a variety of things, where you're moving it forward to address your own research goals. And it can be an interesting kind of back and forth. It allows you a lot of agency. Going to have to describe his or her research support. Sometimes in the institute you're applying to, okay? But they have to describe all of it. It doesn't matter what it's from. They have to describe their previous trainees at your level. So having them list 25 postdocs and no pre-docs will not go over very well. Sponsor has not trained graduate students. Strongly consider having a co-sponsor who counts. Because then you have both of their records there, and it makes the review committee feel like this is going to be okay. I have a junior mentor, and I have a senior person who's going to make sure this goes on. Yes. You probably did not do that. So do think about having a co-mentor. Generally, if you're doing that, that co-mentor will be under. A training plan, which is long. They're going to talk about why it's important to train in that lab or this institution, what resources are available to you, why this is a great idea. Who else will be in the lab? And then they write a really nice paragraph, which might be the one you've seen for a long time, you tape on the wall, about what your potential is in science. This should make you feel. Hold on. So your sponsor has to do something a little out of the ordinary too. So you want to make sure that that you discuss it so that it is in sync. Advice? Ideas that I would put in for the training plan from the sponsor's perspective, that you're using an IDP is expected by NIH, so I would say so. Any remaining coursework, any particular courses or workshops or going to other places to learn things, new research skills with a collaborator or a core, how you'll learn manuscript and grant writing, exactly which national meeting you go to and which societies you want to. Do not say, I'll go to a meeting a year. See you later. When does that mean? Goals for publication, super, really a lot important. You know, I plan to publish a paper a year in this sort of journal. This is my progress to this and so. Also describe lab meetings or seminars or workshops. This should be in more training activities during the grant and sponsors statement. This was something that I have been suggesting to folks, especially as they think about their IUP. These are some of the competencies that we're hoping you're going to get. They happen to be the ones from the National Postdoc Association. So you're learning conceptual knowledge, skill development, communication skills, professionalism. It is a good idea to address all of these things in your training planning and sponsors. Address those. Talk about letters of support. How many letters do you need? What's the maximum number? You're going to ask for letters of support, it's not your mentor because he or she is writing a different thing. So, who are you gonna have write your letters of support? Who did you have write your letters? How many letters did you have total?
I had, for my committee, I had a collaborator, I had my director for neuroscience, and then I also had an academic one, which I think is important, because that is, and that could be the program director. I asked Dr.
The collaborator letter doesn't count.
It's a different one. If you have an actual collaborator, that counts as the collaborator letters, not in the letters of recommendation. So this is where you're hoping they talk about your research experience, potentially with them. They're going to talk a little bit about how committed you are to research. They're going to talk about any productivity you had. They'll talk potentially about how you advance things. Who did you get your letters from?
My previous PI, program director, and committee member.
Pretty much the same. I had two very good mentors at Johns Hopkins too, so you would have to do that.
And so one thing that I emphasize a lot is prepare your letter writers for what role they're playing. Okay? Because if somebody just says, hey, can you write me a great letter? You go, yeah, and they give you your bio sketch and some question. She did really well, and that was really great. She went too. And they say exactly the same thing. So it is really, really helpful if you send even a paragraph or a note saying, it'd be particularly helpful if you could describe when I created that model for doing so. So it's really helpful to prepare your letter writers to be different from each other.
I suggested to me to draft them myself. That would be really, really helpful. Send them a page of what you want them to tell us. They're obviously going to edit it what they want, but it really helps the letter writers as well, especially if you're asking them on a tight deadline. Really help.
Awkward at first, but it'll work out fine. Okay? And people are not insulted at all. They feel like they're saving their time and it's really helpful. So some people expect it, but I think this is really helpful. Okay, then your guide's going to go to study session. It's exactly like that. It's meeting at some horrible hotel in Bethesda, or they also meet on the West Coast, so they kind of alternate the coasts. They read your grants before they come in and they provide initial scores. 1 is really great, 9 is not great at all. And generally, when they all get together, they put their scores in electronically before they meet. And the day before the study section meets, the review organizer for this study section takes all of the scores and takes the average. And if your grant got a 4, a 6, and a 7, it's very likely it will not be discussed at the meeting because it's below 5. So above 5. I'm sorry if it's bad. It wasn't bad as low, but so generally, if the average of your scores is higher than 5, or every single person said 5, 6, 7, they won't discuss your scores at the study section. You will get their narrative comments anyway. So what you won't get is a final score. It'll just give you 3 little asterisks. But you will get reviewer 1's comments, reviewer 2's comments, and reviewer 3's comments in your resubmission. Scores are generally higher than this. The study section will get together, and this person will be primary reviewer 1, will say, this candidate's really superior, and GW is a wonderful place, and the project is fantastic, the training plan is superior. This person will say, I'm not really sure about that, because the mentor is not so good. And then this person will say, I agree with all the comments of the first reviewer, and I think it's a compelling application. They will each have said what their preliminary score is. So this one, I'm making it up. This person said a 3, a 4, and a 2. After that discussion, which is about 15 minutes total, and maybe, this guy will say, hey, I just read a specific aims, and actually I think it's better than you just said. Somebody out of left field says this, okay? At the end of the discussion, they say, okay, what are your final scores? And now they're gonna say, well, I agree with you, I'm gonna give it a 2. And he says, I'm gonna give it a 2 too. And he says, I'm gonna give it a 2. Okay? The range of scores is 2. In the room, including all the people who did not read it, scored. Generally have to announce if you're voting out of rank. So if you said, I thought it stunk, I'm gonna give it. You have to say I'm voting out of rank. And generally you have to say why. What does this guy know about the brain? What those people discussed. So you want to make it very easy for your reviewers to convey the importance of your work. That's what's going to happen. 15 minutes is about typical for a grant, just terrifying. And then everybody votes in whole numbers. You will get a summary statement. This is the beginning of a summary statement. Overall impact is a revised submission, blah, blah, blah. You'll get strengths as bullet points and weaknesses as bullet points. Strengths as bullet for each of the sections that they review. And reviewer 1 and reviewer 2 may disagree about things, which will make you crazy. And then reviewer 3 will bring up something else entirely, which is also disagree. You will very likely have a chance to resubmit that application. So if your grant doesn't get funded, and it depends on the institute, but we're looking at scores sort of 25-ish and lower, that is closer to 1, are generally getting funded, but it can vary a lot around that, so I don't want to give you a hard number. If you got a 35, let's say you're not going to get funded this time, 35 is actually a pretty good score for a first submission. You will need to resubmit. Sadly, everybody in this building has resubmitted an application. We have a section that I appear to have left off of here called an introduction. And your application has all the same parts again, and there's one page called an introduction, which you say, we thank the reviewers for their helpful comments and a guided revision of this submission. Always say nice things to the reviewers. Truly only one will be a repeat. Do not pick fights with the reviewers, even if they're wrong. Okay? So you'll write an introduction, which is 1 page long, that addresses the comments and concerns that they had, some of which might be easy to fix and some of which might be harder to fix. Absolutely get advice about that introduction. And then you do the whole thing again. Submit it and read it.
The resubmission process, is it required that you're resubmitting to the same study section, or is it a choice that you?
It's a choice, but it's an extremely dangerous one. Normally, unless something really, really remarkable happened, you would not try to redirect it there, because at least you know what that study section is worried about. For a new study section, you do not know what they're worried about. So if you're concerned about it, I would try to solve that before you submit. Pretty scary place to change.
Resubmission, of course, I would incorporate some of the changes that are recommended by the reviewer, but in terms of it matching with the previous application, does it have to be very different?
Very good question. So the first thing you turn is called the A0 application. It's the first submission of the grant that's titled Frog Eyes that I've known. If you resubmit it, that becomes the A1 submission, same exact title. Nothing will change about the title. Generally, you're not going to change. Might, if they told you to, change some of the mentors, but not the primary mentor. Right? That, unless he or she died or something. So generally, the basic brunt of the grant is the same. So the goal is to improve the things that were considered problematic. I don't want it to be much different. Now, obviously, in the 6 months or so since you got your comments before you resubmit it, you might have gotten primary data that are different. You might have changed a lot. You might have learned a new technique. When you do science, you go like this, and then there's something super cool over here. Maybe that's where you're going. So you can change that. The reviewers do not see your earlier grant. They see your earlier summary statement. So they're going to see your new grant. Generally, you identify in the margin part that's substantially different. So in your introduction, you say, We appreciate the reviewers' comments that have guided the revision of this application. We really like the part where you said that the candidate was really smart, the mentor was really smart. Say anything they say, you go back on them. Issues were raised about the number of controls. I'm making that up. Okay. So you write back and say, thank you for saying I was smart. My advisor was smart. We've addressed the issues that were raised about so-and-so in the following general way and marked the change in the margin. So people usually use vertical marks where a lot of changes happen, not a single word or something. Okay? And so the reviewer can go through and say, oh, this seems to be the same, and this is where they really address this stuff that they've talked about earlier, grant at all. I look at the summary statement and say, what were the issues before? Have those issues been addressed? Right? On a bad day, the reviewer will look at everything else about the grant and find something else that would be bad. Sometimes it happens. But generally, you are looking for them to have repaired whatever was identified. You do not want to move in part. The majority of fellowships get funded on the submission. It isn't a surprise, but if you turn in all these grants, only some of them are going to be at the top range. The other guys should be coming back as really writing it and having somebody you say this is the thing that's wrong. No one knows. So if you look at it, it's the vast majority of them. But you guys were both funded on the first submission. See? So
The success rate can differ by institute, so there's the importance of knowing where to submit. Some of them 40%, 12%.
The other thing is when you get your scores back, you'll get two numbers. You'll get the actual score and then you'll get the percentile. That's really important. So sometimes your score can be high, or it could be a high number like a 30, but that could still be in the 20th percentile. Right.
some places percentile them and some places do not percentile them, which adds to the confusion in all of this. I'm sorry to say that. Yeah. So generally, yes, if you get the priority score, which is the kind of the raw score that I just talked about, the average of 2, and some people go to higher, that's the average. The percentile is the last 2 study sections, that study section, and their ratings and how this would fall. So it's giving you a percentage, does this study section really need, so a score of 30 is great. That will be reflected in the percentile score. 17%. This high and low things good. One is always good. If that's a low number, I think things get worse and they go down.
Like
Down is
golf.
not a number.
It's like golf, the lowest score wins.
Okay, so still golf. Lowest score wins. Like, do you guys have other questions? So you've got some experts here who've managed this system really well, and now they're spending their money, proceeding apace and making research discoveries. Questions about this?
Does the study section members' expertise or interests affect your score?
Very much. Okay. So if I think about I'm a neuroscientist, so on neuroscience, there were people who work in epilepsy, there were people with excitatory amino acid transporters. People have their interests, but it's not likely to affect them. It could affect their understanding of what you're saying. That's a different thing. So nobody's trying to fund their own thing, but they might not understand what you're telling them. So it's another reason to try and make this as generally appreciated as you can. You do not want this to appeal only to one person on that study section. So as much as you can make it broadly important, don't run with that.
It will though definitely affect you if you are saying only data that's contradictory. Right? If you look at your study section and you see someone who's in your field, do the work to figure out what.
I think so, at least for applications, like, of course the roster is there, but it changes when you don't know who's going to be on there. So you can have a general idea, but it's not like those people are going to always be. And their knowledge, like, they're appropriate for on the beat on those types of, they're experts in some general way, but for example, my application was very, very, very specific and niche type of thing. But I made it very clear and very obvious so that people who were doing it, so like studying like sociology and like technologists, like people who weren't so maybe still understand. That's really important. If you look at the roster and see like what these people's backgrounds are, that can be really helpful. And there's also a reality check, like, wait, will someone else actually know what I'm talking about, or do I need to explain this more in depth? Of course, taking up the space is one in your field in general.
So it is a rare thing when you look at a study section roster that you don't, there's two people who understand your work. Really dismaying, but like in detail. It's not common. And that's not the point. So you do need to have this broader, that's true all the way through the board. You are the ones that go in. You're gonna go, what is that person there? They don't know anything. So a little bit difficult if you're choosing between study sections to find the one that is more prepared for the type of methodology that they know, the more concepts that they know. And it's rare that you're going to have somebody really snacking. Now that's the other thing. Every now and then there is somebody snacking. You don't want them to read it. Direct. You begin to look like a paranoid crazy person. Okay? So just be a little careful about when you write the letter saying so-and-so does not have the expertise for this.
Experience, I wasn't able to like say, I want to do this. Like, there was one. That was it. One, that one. So again, for a application.
Yep. Yep.
In the general, walking the fine line between this is novel and there's a hole in the field that I want to address, but also like this is a training grant and I want to be able to show that this is feasible and not overreaching. Did you guys find that like working through your hands and mentoring other collaborators was helpful, or did you feel like you needed to go to someone outside of that to feel and understand some? I'm mostly worried about this. So like, am I losing too much?
So yeah, I think that your committee will definitely. The other thing is, right, you can still have those goals for your thesis, and they might not necessarily follow your effort. Back and forth.
Whether
He is
we're
an expert. Yeah, he is an expert. So, maybe a little more. My committee definitely shaved down, but my effort went by a lot.
did you guys have?
I had two.
This is not a place to flex your muscles, okay? So you can still do all that great research, but this is not a place to beat somebody to death because the reviewers will go, psh, not gonna happen. I mean, they'll very quickly.
You're overambitious.
You're overambitious, and then all they have to say, right? So they don't have to read it all. So it's a good place to have strong goals. You can say, you know, if we succeeded this in the future, we might look at X, Y, Z. That's totally okay, but it's a reasonable thing. As strange as that may seem. We have a class, yes. So I've tried to put a lot of the materials in the class, which is about writing your qualifier and fellowship application. I have a formal class runs this spring. Normally, you would take it in the spring of your second year, right before you take your qualifier. It goes through how to pick hypotheses and how to write specific answers and how to write all these sections. Everybody who took it last year said it was too much work.
Surprise.
I'm gonna be honest about that, because it is a lot of work. I run that class. This year is gonna be much more student kind of, not grading, but reading each other's proposals. Like it's pass fail. The goal here is not to grade you on fellowship writing. It's to help you work. that. So that runs in the spring. I forgot what the number is.
BMSC 8219.
Here you go.
How many credits?
It is 2 credits. And I would say probably the students who complained about the workload last spring were very happy over the summer and into the fall when they were actually doing their qualifier.
Questions?
So obviously, the best part about that for everyone is getting money to help support your research, but it really does put you on the track for being successful in academia. I've been told time and time again, once you get your F31, it makes it a lot easier to then get your F32 and then apply for new awards. It sort of lines you down that track.
Those are all true statements.
Nice.
It still feels good to
Far
say
down.
that.
Yeah.
It's experience gaining support for your research ideas. That's still important if you go into biotech. You have to do that and get capital. So it is good experience to do it. Obviously, you probably would write all of those grants on the way to do it. But it is, it's a nice award to get. Even if it's not a heck of a lot of money, it's a nice recognition.
Also gives you a little bit more independent lab. It kind of makes you a little bit more your own boss. So if there's interviews that you want to try out, or if there's conferences that you want to attend because you're nice, they don't have.
Okay, so I'm happy to talk with any of you as you write your fellowships, and I'm sure that these guys would be available to you about their fellowship experiences.